Okay, everybody, welcome to the God Shot on Addiction. Years ago, I remember hearing from the United Nations that their studies estimated that at least 1 out of 3 people on this planet are addicted to something. They also said another 1 out of 3 people on the planet are seriously depressed. I'm hoping if you're watching the video, you're one of the 1 out of 3 people that doesn't struggle or suffer from each of those things, but addictions are rampant. And we all have our own proclivity, our own tendency to go with one addiction over another. Okay, but it is something that you want to have a spiritual help with, but you also want to work on a psychological level. So for that point, I have brought my friend and licensed family and marriage counselor, Cindy Garcia, to be with me on this God shot to make sure that you get some good, solid advice. So, Cindy, welcome. Thanks for being with us. Um, Cindy, what do you know about addiction?
Well, a lot. A lot of people are under the misconception that there's only two forms of addiction, alcohol or drug abuse, but there isn't. There are many forms of addiction. Japan is actually the first and only country currently that has a recovery rehab center for video gaming. They have a video game addiction clinic in Japan because their cases for video game addiction in Japan is ridiculously high. There's also sex addiction, where people that just have the need to have constant sex, or you're just so addicted to watching pornography websites or pornography type videos that it inhibits you from being able to perform sexually like in a natural sense. And you have addictions also to food. There are some people that we call them emotional eaters, and they just like, I guess, to constantly fill that void, whatever void they feel inside. It's like, I gotta eat, and then they complain when they're like 300 pounds. So there are many forms of addiction, not just drug and alcohol abuse.
Cindy, is there a process that is kind of universal that you would recommend for someone no matter what their addiction is, whether it's vaping, smoking, drinking, drugging, heroin, weed, video games, technology, porn? Is there a standard process of the getting through it that you recommend, or each one is a little different?
Each one is a little different. It's depending on the addiction and the severity and how long it's been, prevalent in their life. I have currently two cases that I'm dealing with. One is an alcohol abuser, and the other one is a cocaine and heroin addict. So with her, she's the cocaine and heroin addict. She now has, I believe, 6 months without using either or, and we have been working with her tirelessly. She has done NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous. A lot of people think that there's only AA, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a support group for people in the recovery phase of alcoholism. But there's also NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous. So anyone who's struggling with like any type of like really heavy drug abuse, the heroin, the cocaine, crack, meth, I would definitely suggest that they go to NA for help. So usually having a client be willing to go to self-help groups is usually the best route to start with, just because those professionals are specifically trained in that domain. And then when they usually come to me, they need to give me reassurance, and they actually need to sign a contract that they are going to refrain from using the substances. And as clinicians, we actually legally can allow someone to come in the room if they are under the influence of something. So my alcoholic client that I mentioned, he came into the session a little bit tipsy on Friday. And when I didn't allow him to come in the room, he slammed my door. He stormed out of the office. It was like this big scene that he made. I was scared for my safety, but that comes with the territory of the work. If you're going to come to talk about something really, really difficult, how can you have that conversation if you're not coherent? If you're not in your five senses, if they're not in tune, how can anything that I'm saying to you, how will that even resonate or stick if you're not all there? So each one is different, but definitely going to one of those recovery programs is like those groups is a great way to start, but also learning your triggers. Each person has different triggers, and obviously their triggers are more prevalent because they have gone to something that to distract them from it, from whatever trigger feeling they have, so that they don't feel it. So I'm going to shoot up because I don't want to feel depressed. Or my girlfriend just broke up with me again, so I'm going to drink myself silly so I can just go to sleep. And then it becomes a habit. So I've always told my clients, once you see that it's becoming a habit and you're always going to, whether it's the food, sex, porn, drugs, alcohol, any video games, your phone, once you see that you're going to that every time you are triggered, then it's when red flags should go off. Like, oh, okay, like I'm showing addictive behaviors.
Okay. Jenny, that's really good advice if there's somebody watching this got shot and they're the one that has the addiction. What do you do if you are in a relationship with or a family with somebody who they're the one that has the addiction issue? How would you recommend a person who has a significant person in their life that has the addiction and is not doing anything about it? What do you recommend?
See, that's when therapy gets really, really tricky. My cocaine user, she's sober, but her mother and her sister both relapsed. And she's really, really struggling, and it's very difficult for her to remain sober because that is triggering her, obviously. Like her mother relapsed on alcohol and her sister relapsed on meth. So it's a lot of reassuring her that she has the will, and sadly, the only thing she can control is herself. I always tell my clients that we all want the best for our loved ones, especially if you see your loved one struggling with an addiction. But I always have to try really, really hard to get them to understand. Sadly, in life, the only things we can control are ourselves. So if your loved one is unwilling to make the changes and is unwilling to get the help, you can try and try and try all you want, but your efforts will be they you know they won't matter, sadly. And it's not that they don't love you, but that they're not mentally there to be able to hear your advice or hear your concerns because they're not there yet. Sadly, they need to get there. And I know that it's easier said than done. We want to protect our loved ones in any way we can.
Sure.
But if you're trying and trying and trying and they're not doing nothing, then you need to try your best yourself to not sink, like to not get depressed or to not feel guilty, because that isn't about you. That is a journey that they need to go through on their own. Yeah, you can support them, but they need to be willing to go through it, sadly. You can't force anyone to get the help or to get sober if they don't want to. Because when they're forced to do that, the studies have actually shown that they are more likely to relapse because it wasn't on their terms. It wasn't on their time that they wanted to work on it. It was because someone forced it onto them.
Yeah. Yeah, we all know of celebrities that have been in and out of rehab countless times because some court mandated it, but they themselves weren't really ready to make a change. That's a very painful aspect to life, that nobody really stops bad habits until they're ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned about that I've advised teenagers to do or to try in their families is with an addictive person to do an intervention. Maybe as a family or a social circle. Would you say a few words about that? Have you found it to be effective on occasion?
Sometimes. Sadly, I've actually seen it go the opposite way. Like, oh,
Really?
is this a freaking intervention? Like, you're all bombarding me, and and that person feels like they're in the hot seat and that they're the problem. And usually the person, whatever addiction they may have, they're going to deflect it onto the individuals doing the intervention. Like, well, I drink because you piss me off. Well, I smoke because you're always nagging me. Well, I do this because I'm the primary breadwinner and I just need to de-stress when I come home. And so just be prepared if you are going to do an intervention, that the studies have shown that it has more probability that it's going to go south, sadly. But usually some people, it has worked better when it's one-on-one. Like if your brother is struggling with some type of addiction, if the sister alone comes, or another brother, or one of the brothers comes alone, and it's just a one-on-one, the person doesn't feel like they're so much on a hot seat. But if you are going to do an intervention, try your best, and I mean your utmost best, to come at them in a non-judgmental way. Don't come at them and be like, oh my God, like all you do is play video games and like you're a bum. Or like you're always coming home drunk, like we're tired of that. Like that's definitely going to put the person on, their walls are just going to go up and up and up. And they're just going to get on the defense. But if you come at them in a sincere, concerned way, like, Dad, I'm worried about your health because, you know, I see you're coming home intoxicated and God forbid you get into a car crash, you know, coming home, or you kill somebody because you're drinking and driving. Like, I don't want that for you. I want you to walk me down the aisle one day. I want you to see your grandkids one day. How can that be if I lose you? Like, you come at them like that, they're more likely to be like, oh damn, I didn't know that my daughter or my son or my wife was that concerned. Like, I always felt judged, but now I'm hearing worry, I'm hearing concern, I'm hearing fear. Usually when people express those feelings, then the addictive person will hear you better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that interventions work best if you have a professional facilitator. Just kind of make
Yeah.
sure that that happens. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for a young person to try and correct an adult. It's almost guaranteed that they're going to be discounted. Oh, you're such a drama queen. Oh, how did you possibly put that together? I don't have a problem. What are you, crazy? No, stop exaggerating, you know, and that's why the younger person usually needs some kind of help or reinforcement as they try and, you know, make a difference. But they do have to, you do have to try. It may not go anywhere, but you have to open your mouth, right? Because if you don't open your mouth and something horrible happens, you'll always wonder, maybe if I would have said something, maybe that would have made a difference. But you have to also accept that people don't change till they're ready. Yeah. Cindy, any other last minute, any other additional advice for a person either struggling with an addiction or having to live with someone else who has an addiction?
If the addiction comes to the point where it's putting your own life at risk, like let's say your father is an aggressive drunk, then I would say, and like you witness him beating your mother, I would definitely say, please call 911, because that definitely should not happen. So but other than that, like, you should, sadly, you should just focus on yourself, and you know, because you can't change them if they're not willing to change.
Mm-hmm.
And just know that, like how you just said, Tony, that you wanted the best for them, and at least you opened your mouth, and at least you let them know that you were worried and concerned. At least you planted a seed in their brain. Now it's up to them if they want to water the plant or not.
Cindy, what if the addiction is, for somebody watching this, if the addiction is self-harming or an eating disorder? What's the way to get help with that?
If the addiction is to self-harm, like if they're just addicted to the feeling of pain, like let's say someone is cutting themselves, the point of cutting is for two reasons. One, people like that adrenaline rush. They like the feeling of pain, believe it or not. And it's also a distracting mechanism. It's a, you know, it's a way to protect yourself. It's like, I don't want to feel these yucky feelings that I'm feeling, so I'm going to focus on the pain. So there are other alternatives. Like, I'll give you a quick coping skill that I give. I have a few clients that like to self-harm. I tell them to go into the freezer and to grab ice, like literally to grab ice and to hold it in your hand because it will burn. You still will feel the sensation of pain, but you're not harming yourself. So we're moving from self-harm and we're just going to hurt. So you still get that sensation of pain, but you're not going to harm yourself by holding those cubes of ice in your hand. So it's a matter of getting them to, like helping people to, decrease the frequency in which they need to go to that, whatever thing they need to do to de-stress or to escape from the world. But again, it's only when they want to and when they're ready to.
Okay, good. Cindy, you're trained. You're fairly newly trained, and you're equipped to help somebody who's burning themselves, cutting themselves. You have the knowledge to help them rewire their brain, right?
Mhm.
But maybe an older therapist who's trained way back in the day, I found that there are some, they just it wasn't part of their training, so they're not quite as equipped as maybe you might be as a relatively newly trained to help with that particular situation. What about
Sometimes. What about what?
what about um what about any kind of eating disorder?
Well, I actually have a client who's in recovery from anorexia, but my title is I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. But that means that my specialty is marriage and family therapy. But nowhere in there did I say that I'm an eating disorder specialist. So my client just started seeing an eating disorder specialist. So I had told her, I think we should move forward and close the case on my end because one, clients should never have two therapists. Like having a therapist and a psychiatrist that's an okay thing, but having two therapists is usually one that's not ethical, and two it's confusing because one therapist has their form of therapy, has their style, and the other one has their style. So it can confuse the client and it can interrupt the therapeutic process in a negative way. So one, I closed it just for ethical reasons, but because I told her I want you to get the best help you can get. This woman it's her name, comma, eating disorder specialist. That's not my specialty, and I am not ashamed to say that that isn't my specialty. And I want you, I told my client, to get the best help you can get. And if you ever do want to come back, you know that the doors are always open to my office, but I think that it would be best for you to just stick with this therapist for now to help you retain your recovery.
Okay, Cindy, thank you so much. Okay, so anybody watching this Godshot, you now have a lot more knowledge about what to do regarding addiction, regarding any kind of self-harming, eating disorders, things like that. The main thing is get help. Talk to other people in a self-help group that had the same issue as you. They know they have a lot to offer you, okay? And definitely the therapeutic process. Okay, thanks again, Cindy. Take care, everybody. God bless. And don't forget to leave God into the mix to help you get through these things, okay? One of the ways in which he heals is through counseling. And so you want to definitely take it to prayer and definitely take it to a professional person that knows more than you and people you trust know. And talking to someone you trust alongside too is also good. Okay, God bless you. Take care. Thanks again, Cindy.